The silence pressed against my skin like cold glass. I stood at the altar in my ivory dress, hands folded before me, and waited. Dolores Reed sat in the front pew, arms crossed beneath the wide brim of her lavender hat. She had not smiled once since entering the church hall. Her lips formed a thin line of disapproval so sharp it could cut the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows. Reverend Hayes held the liturgy open, his eyes darting between Marcus and me, uncertain whether to continue. Marcus's hand trembled slightly against mine. I felt the tremor travel up my arm and settle somewhere near my heart. Dolores shifted in her seat, the rustle of fabric deliberate and loud. She wanted everyone to hear her discontent. My father stood near the side door, his face unreadable. He had not moved since the ceremony began. I could feel his gaze on me, steady and watchful. Something about his stillness gave me courage, though I could not name why. The day had begun differently. I had woken in my childhood bedroom, sunlight pouring through lace curtains my mother had sewn years before she passed. Aunt Camille had helped me into my dress, her hands gentle as she fastened each button along my spine. She spoke little, only humming softly, a tune I recognized from Sunday mornings when the choir would warm up before service. The dress had been my mother's. I wore it because it made me feel less alone. Aunt Camille had kissed my forehead before we left for the church. She told me I looked like grace itself. I wanted to believe her. The church hall was modest, nothing grand. Wooden pews lined both sides of a narrow aisle. Flowers arranged in white and cream sat on pedestals near the altar. The scent of lilies hung thick in the air. Guests filled perhaps half the seats. Friends from my years at university, cousins I had not seen since childhood, a few neighbors who had known my family for decades. Marcus's side of the hall held fewer people. His mother occupied the space of 3. Junior sat beside her, shoulders hunched, glancing toward the exit as though calculating escape routes. Marcus had warned me about his mother. He had told me she could be difficult. He used that word often. Difficult. As though it excused the coldness in her eyes whenever she looked at me. Dolores had objected to the marriage from the moment Marcus told her of our engagement. She had called me unsuitable, too young, too naive, too unlike the woman she had envisioned for her eldest son. Marcus tried to reassure me. He said she would soften with time, that mothers always worried, that she simply needed to know me better. I wanted to believe him. I had tried to win her approval. I visited her home with cakes I had baked, asked her advice on matters I already understood, complimented her garden and her cooking and the photographs displayed on her mantelpiece. Nothing worked. She met every gesture with suspicion. She questioned my education, my family, my intentions. She suggested I was marrying Marcus for security rather than love. The accusation stung because it was so far from the truth. I loved Marcus deeply. I had loved him since the day he stumbled into the campus library, arms full of textbooks, and asked if I knew where to find materials on constitutional law. We had spent hours together that afternoon, and many afternoons after. He was kind. He listened when I spoke. He laughed at jokes others found too subtle. He made me feel seen. His mother saw none of that. She saw only a threat to her authority. The wedding morning brought fresh tension. Dolores arrived late, her entrance timed to disrupt the pre-ceremony calm. She walked through the church hall doors with Junior trailing behind, her heels striking the stone floor with sharp, deliberate clicks. She inspected the flowers, frowned at the arrangement, and muttered something to Junior about poor taste. She examined the guest book, ran her finger down the list of names, and shook her head. She approached Marcus and me as we stood near the vestibule. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my dress. She said nothing directly to me. Instead, she turned to Marcus and asked if he was certain. Just that. Are you certain? Marcus nodded. He squeezed my hand. Dolores walked away without another word. I felt my chest tighten. Aunt Camille touched my shoulder and whispered that everything would be fine. I nodded, though I did not believe her. Now, standing at the altar, I realized the ceremony had stalled. Reverend Hayes cleared his throat gently. Marcus looked at me, apology written across his face. Dolores shifted again, louder this time. My father remained motionless near the door. I kept my eyes forward. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me falter. Dolores did not wait until after the vows to make her feelings known. Midway through the ceremony, as Reverend Hayes began the passage on love and commitment, she rose from her seat. The movement was abrupt, theatrical. Every head turned toward her. She smoothed the front of her dress, adjusted her hat, and walked toward the altar. Reverend Hayes paused mid-sentence. Marcus released my hand. Dolores stopped 3 paces from where we stood. She addressed her son as though I were not present. She told him he was making a mistake. She said marriage was serious, that it required maturity and readiness neither of us possessed. She said I had enchanted him, distracted him from his responsibilities, from his future. She said he deserved better. She said these things in a voice loud enough to carry through the entire hall. Guests murmured. Someone gasped. Junior stood but did not approach. Aunt Camille gripped the edge of her pew. My father remained still. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Dolores raised her hand to silence him. She told him he would regret this day. She told him he was dishonoring her, his family, everything she had sacrificed to raise him. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were cold, clinical. She said I was not worthy of her son. She said I lacked substance, character, the qualities necessary to support a man of Marcus's potential. She said I would fail him. She turned and walked back to her seat. The silence that followed was suffocating. Reverend Hayes looked to Marcus, then to me. He asked quietly if we wished to continue. Marcus nodded, though his face had gone pale. I nodded as well. My voice had disappeared. I could not have spoken if I tried. The ceremony resumed. We exchanged vows. Our words sounded hollow, mechanical. We exchanged rings. Marcus's hand shook so violently he nearly dropped mine. Reverend Hayes pronounced us husband and wife. Marcus kissed me briefly, without conviction. Applause followed, scattered and hesitant. Dolores did not clap. She sat rigid, arms crossed, her expression triumphant. I felt as though I had lost something vital, though I could not name what. The reception followed in the adjacent hall. Tables draped in white linen held platters of food prepared by women from my father's church. Fried chicken, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, sweet potato pie. The spread was generous, lovingly made. Guests filled plates and found seats. Music played softly from a speaker in the corner. Marcus and I sat at the head table. Dolores sat as far from us as possible, surrounded by Junior and a few distant relatives who seemed obligated to keep her company. She spoke loudly, her voice cutting through the music. She criticized the food, the decorations, the choice of venue. She said the hall smelled musty. She said the flowers were wilting. She said the entire affair felt rushed, poorly planned, beneath the standards her family maintained. I pushed food around my plate. I had no appetite. Aunt Camille approached and squeezed my shoulder. She told me to hold my head high. She said Dolores was wounded, frightened of losing her son, and lashing out from a place of pain. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel compassion for Dolores. I could not. I felt only humiliation. Guests approached to offer congratulations. They spoke kindly, but I saw pity in their eyes. They had witnessed my degradation. They knew I had been publicly diminished. I smiled and thanked them. I pretended everything was fine. Marcus sat beside me, silent. He stared at his plate. He had not touched his food either. I wanted him to defend me, to stand and tell his mother her behavior was unacceptable. He did not. He sat in silence, paralyzed by guilt and confusion. My father moved through the hall slowly, speaking with guests, shaking hands, nodding at familiar faces. He seemed unbothered by the earlier disruption. His calm unsettled me. I expected him to be angry, to confront Dolores, to demand she apologize. He did none of those things. He simply moved through the room as though nothing unusual had occurred. I watched him pause near Dolores's table. He spoke to her briefly. I could not hear their words. Dolores's expression shifted, just slightly. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps. Uncertainty. My father smiled, patted her shoulder gently, and walked away. Dolores stared after him, her confidence momentarily shaken. The reception dragged on. Guests began to leave. They offered final congratulations and well wishes. They hugged me, shook Marcus's hand, and departed quietly. The hall emptied slowly. Dolores left without saying goodbye. Junior followed her, glancing back once with an expression I could not decipher. Aunt Camille stayed to help clean. She stacked plates, folded linens, hummed the same tune from that morning. My father remained as well. He moved chairs back into place, swept crumbs from tables, worked with quiet efficiency. Marcus and I sat together, exhausted and wordless. I felt as though the day had hollowed me out. I had entered the church hall as a hopeful bride. I left as something else entirely. The days following the wedding passed in a fog. Marcus and I moved into a small flat he had rented months earlier. 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, a living room barely large enough for a sofa and television. The flat smelled of old paint and damp carpet. Marcus tried to make it feel like home. He unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, hung a few photographs on the walls. I sat on the sofa and watched him. I felt detached, as though observing my life from a distance. He asked if I was all right. I nodded. He did not press further. We moved around each other carefully, politely, like strangers sharing space. Dolores called daily. Marcus answered every time. He spoke to her in hushed tones, stepping into the bedroom and closing the door. I heard his voice rise occasionally, then fall again into murmurs. He emerged from these conversations looking drained. He apologized each time. He said his mother was adjusting, that she needed time, that she meant well despite her harshness. I said nothing. I no longer believed adjustment would come. Dolores had made her position clear. I was unwelcome. I was inferior. I was a mistake. Aunt Camille visited often. She brought food, groceries, small tokens meant to brighten the flat. She sat with me on the sofa, asked how I was managing, listened without judgment when I admitted I felt lost. She told me marriage was difficult in the beginning, that every couple faced trials, that patience would see us through. I appreciated her kindness, though her words felt insufficient against the weight pressing on my chest. She mentioned my father once. She said he seemed pleased with how the wedding had gone. I laughed bitterly. Pleased. Aunt Camille smiled gently. She said my father saw things others did not. She said I should trust him. I did not understand what she meant. I let the comment pass. Junior appeared at our door one evening. Marcus was at work. Junior stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. He asked if he could come in. I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the sofa, glanced around the flat, and told me he was sorry. Sorry for his mother's behavior. Sorry for not speaking up. Sorry for the way I had been treated. He said Dolores was impossible when she set her mind against something. He said she had always been controlling, but her behavior at the wedding had crossed a line. He said Marcus was struggling with guilt. He said his brother loved me but felt torn between his wife and his mother. Junior's apology surprised me. It was the first acknowledgement from anyone in Marcus's family that Dolores had behaved unacceptably. I thanked him. He nodded, stood, and left quickly. I sat alone in the quiet flat and felt a small measure of relief. Someone had seen the truth. My father invited us to dinner the following Sunday. Marcus hesitated when I told him. He asked if Dolores would be there. I assured him she would not. My father lived alone in the house where I had grown up. He cooked simple meals, kept the rooms tidy, maintained the garden my mother had planted years before. The house smelled of cedar and old books. We arrived early evening. My father greeted us at the door, shook Marcus's hand, kissed my cheek, and ushered us inside. Dinner was quiet. Roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. My father asked Marcus about work, about the flat, about plans for the future. Marcus answered politely, though tension edged his voice. My father listened attentively, nodding occasionally, offering no judgment. I watched him carefully. His calm remained unshaken. He seemed to carry a secret knowledge, something he held close and revealed to no one. After dinner, we sat in the living room. My father poured tea. He asked how we were adjusting to married life. Marcus admitted it had been difficult. He mentioned his mother's interference, the daily calls, the tension it created. My father nodded. He said adjustments took time. He said marriage required patience, trust, and the willingness to protect one another. He looked at Marcus when he said this. His gaze was steady, almost challenging. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. My father smiled gently and changed the subject. He asked about my plans, my interests, my hopes for the coming months. I answered briefly. I had few plans. I felt adrift. My father placed his hand over mine and told me things would improve. He said sometimes the hardest battles were fought silently, and the strongest victories came from patience. I did not understand. I wanted to ask what he meant. Something in his expression stopped me. He knew something. Something important. Something he was not yet ready to share. We left late that evening. Marcus drove in silence. I stared out the window, replaying my father's words. Patience. Silence. Victory. The phrases circled in my mind. I thought about the way he had looked at Dolores during the reception. The brief conversation. The flicker of uncertainty on her face. My father was planning something. I felt certain of it. I did not know what. I did not know when. I only knew he had not forgotten the humiliation I had endured. He was waiting, watching, preparing. Dolores's interference intensified over the following weeks. She arrived at our flat unannounced. She walked through the rooms, inspecting, commenting, criticizing. She rearranged items in the kitchen, claiming I had organized things inefficiently. She examined the refrigerator, noting the lack of fresh vegetables, the presence of convenience foods. She asked Marcus if he was eating properly, implying I was failing as a wife. Marcus stood silently while she moved through our home. He offered no defense. I retreated to the bedroom and waited for her to leave. Each visit left me feeling smaller, less substantial. I began to dread the sound of her knock. Marcus's behavior changed. He grew distant, irritable. He worked longer hours, came home exhausted, spoke little. He avoided eye contact. He stopped touching me casually, the small gestures that had once come naturally. I asked if something was wrong. He said he was tired. He said work was demanding. He said everything was fine. I did not believe him. I sensed the weight of his mother's expectations pressing on him, bending him toward her will. He had become a man divided. Dolores continued to call daily. Marcus continued to answer. Their conversations grew longer. He stopped closing the bedroom door. I heard fragments. His mother's voice, shrill and insistent, leaking through the phone. She told him to reconsider. She told him he could annul the marriage. She told him I was dragging him down. Marcus protested weakly. He said he loved me. He said he had made a commitment. Dolores laughed bitterly. She said love was not enough. She said I would ruin him. I stopped eating properly. Food lost its appeal. I lost weight. Aunt Camille noticed. She brought meals, sat with me, urged me to take care of myself. She said I could not let Dolores break me. She said I had to remain strong. I nodded. I tried. I felt my strength draining away. I felt myself disappearing. Marcus noticed but said nothing. He seemed relieved by my silence, my withdrawal. It made things easier for him. He did not have to choose between us if I simply faded into the background. My father called one evening. He asked how I was managing. His voice was gentle, probing. I lied. I told him everything was fine. He did not believe me. He asked to speak with Marcus. I handed the phone over. Marcus took it reluctantly. He stepped into the hallway. I heard his voice, defensive at first, then quieter. My father spoke for several minutes. Marcus listened. When he returned, he looked shaken. He handed me the phone without a word. My father asked me to visit him the next day. Alone. I agreed. Marcus did not ask what my father wanted. He retreated to the bedroom and closed the door. I arrived at my father's house the following afternoon. He greeted me with a hug that lasted longer than usual. He led me to the kitchen and poured tea. We sat at the table, the same table where I had eaten breakfast as a child. He asked me to tell him the truth. I hesitated. Then I spoke. I told him about Dolores's visits, the constant criticism, Marcus's withdrawal, the sense that I was losing myself. I told him I felt invisible. My father listened without interruption. When I finished, he reached across the table and took my hand. He told me he had suspected as much. He told me I was not invisible. He told me I was stronger than I realized. He told me to trust him. He said something was coming. Something that would change everything. I asked what he meant. He smiled and said I would understand soon. He said Dolores had underestimated me. More importantly, she had underestimated him. Aunt Camille arrived while I was still there. She embraced me, looked at my father, and nodded as though they had discussed something privately. She told me to hold on a little longer. She said justice was coming. Her words echoed my father's. I felt a flicker of hope. I did not understand the nature of this justice, but I trusted them. They had never lied to me. They had never abandoned me. I returned to the flat that evening feeling lighter. Marcus was already asleep. I lay beside him in the darkness and wondered what my father knew. I wondered what he planned. I wondered how long I would have to wait. The answer came sooner than I expected. Dolores called the next morning. She told Marcus she was organizing a family gathering. She said it was important, that everyone needed to attend. She said she had announcements to make. Marcus agreed without consulting me. He told me we were expected at his mother's house the following Sunday. I felt my stomach tighten. I did not want to go. I did not want to face her again. Marcus said we had no choice. He said refusing would make things worse. I agreed reluctantly. I called my father and told him about the gathering. He asked for the date and time. I told him. He said he would be there. I was confused. Dolores had not invited him. He said it did not matter. He said he had business with Dolores Reed. His tone was firm, final. I did not argue. I trusted him. Sunday arrived too quickly. Marcus and I drove to his mother's house in silence. The journey felt longer than usual. I watched the streets pass, the familiar neighborhoods giving way to the more affluent area where Dolores lived. Her house was large, imposing. A two-story structure with a manicured lawn, tall windows, a front porch adorned with wicker furniture and potted plants. Marcus parked in the driveway. He turned off the engine and sat motionless. He looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded. I had heard those words too often. They had lost their meaning. We entered through the front door. Dolores greeted us in the foyer. She embraced Marcus, ignored me entirely. Junior stood near the living room doorway, hands in his pockets. He nodded at me, his expression sympathetic. Other family members milled about. Aunts, uncles, cousins I had met briefly at the wedding. They greeted Marcus warmly, offered me polite smiles that did not reach their eyes. I felt like an intruder. We moved into the living room. The space was crowded. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle. Dolores directed people to sit. She positioned herself at the front, standing like a speaker addressing an audience. Marcus and I sat near the back. I clasped my hands in my lap and stared at the floor. Dolores began speaking. She thanked everyone for coming. She said family was important, that unity mattered, that difficult conversations sometimes needed to happen in the presence of those who cared. She looked directly at Marcus. She said she had tried to accept his choices, tried to support him despite her reservations. She said she could no longer remain silent. She said I was unsuitable. She listed my failings. Too young. Too inexperienced. Too lacking in the qualities necessary to support a man like Marcus. She said the marriage had been a mistake. She said Marcus deserved the opportunity to correct that mistake. She said she had consulted with a lawyer. She said an annulment was possible. She said she would support Marcus financially, emotionally, in whatever way necessary to free him from this burden. She gestured toward me when she said burden. The room fell silent. I felt every eye turn toward me. Humiliation washed over me, hot and suffocating. Marcus sat frozen. He did not speak. He did not defend me. He stared at his mother as though seeing her for the first time. Junior stood abruptly. He told Dolores she was out of line. He said she had no right to interfere. Dolores silenced him with a glare. She told him he was too young to understand. She told him to sit down. He did not. He looked at Marcus, waiting for his brother to speak. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again. Words seemed to fail him. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run from that room, from that house, from the entire suffocating situation. I remained seated. Something held me there. A stubborn refusal to give Dolores the satisfaction of seeing me flee. The front door opened. My father stepped inside. He walked into the living room as though he had been invited. Dolores turned sharply. "Gerald," she said. His name came out like an accusation. "What are you doing here?" My father smiled calmly. He greeted her politely. He greeted the assembled family. He apologized for arriving unannounced. He said he had heard about the gathering and felt his presence might be useful. Dolores's face reddened. She told him this was a private family matter. My father nodded. He said he understood. He said he also understood that certain matters, once revealed, ceased to be private. Dolores's expression shifted. Confusion replaced anger. "What are you talking about?" My father walked to the front of the room. He stood beside Dolores, his posture relaxed, his voice steady. He said he had something to share. Something Dolores might have forgotten. He spoke about the past. He spoke about a time more than 30 years earlier, when he and Dolores had known each other. I sat forward, my heart pounding. I had not known they shared history. My father explained that they had attended the same church as young adults. Dolores had been engaged to another man, a man named Thomas Reed, Marcus's father. My father had been friends with Thomas. They had worked together, spent time together, trusted one another. My father paused. He looked at Dolores. Her face had gone pale. He continued. He said there had been an incident, a mistake, a moment of weakness. Dolores had been unfaithful to Thomas. She had confided in my father, begged him to keep her secret. She had been terrified Thomas would discover the truth and leave her. My father had agreed. He had kept her secret for more than 3 decades. Dolores stared at him, her mouth open, her composure shattered. The room erupted. Family members murmured, whispered, turned to one another in confusion. Junior looked at his mother, shock written across his face. Marcus sat frozen, his expression blank. Dolores found her voice. She told my father he was lying. She said he was inventing stories to defend his daughter. My father shook his head. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. He said he had brought proof. Letters. Written in Dolores's hand. Letters she had sent to my father decades earlier. Letters in which she confessed her infidelity. Letters in which she pleaded for his silence. He held the envelope out toward her. Dolores did not take it. She stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her chest. My father's voice remained calm. He said he had never intended to reveal this secret. He said he believed people deserved second chances, that past mistakes should not define a person's entire life. He said he had kept silent all these years out of respect for Thomas, who had passed away years earlier, and out of compassion for Dolores. But he could no longer remain silent while she destroyed his daughter's life. He turned to the room. He said Dolores had spent decades building a reputation as a woman of integrity, a pillar of the community, a devoted mother. He said that reputation had been built on a foundation of secrecy and hypocrisy. He said she had no right to judge others when her own past remained hidden. He said my marriage to Marcus was legitimate, honest, and built on love. He said if Dolores continued her campaign against me, he would ensure the entire community knew the truth. He would share the letters. He would tell anyone who would listen. He would dismantle the carefully constructed image she had spent a lifetime creating. He looked at her. The choice was hers. Dolores did not respond immediately. She stood motionless, her face drained of color. The family members seated around the room remained silent, processing what they had just heard. Junior stared at his mother, disbelief etched across his features. Marcus slowly turned his head toward Dolores, his expression unreadable. My father folded the envelope and returned it to his pocket. He did not gloat. He did not appear triumphant. He simply waited. I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me. My father had carried this secret for decades. He had known Dolores Reed's hidden truth and said nothing. He had watched her build her life, her reputation, her authority, all while holding the power to dismantle it. He had chosen silence. Until now. Until she had threatened me. I looked at him with new understanding. His patience had not been passivity. His silence had not been weakness. He had been waiting. Watching. Protecting me in ways I had not recognized. Dolores finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. She told my father he had no right. She said the past was buried. She said Thomas had never known, that his memory should not be tainted. My father nodded. He agreed. He said he had no desire to tarnish Thomas's memory. He said Thomas had been a good man, a faithful friend. He said that was precisely why he had kept the secret. But he would not allow Dolores to weaponize her righteousness against an innocent young woman. He would not stand by while she attempted to destroy my marriage. The choice remained hers. She could accept the marriage, treat me with respect, and allow Marcus and me to build our lives together. Or she could continue her campaign, and he would reveal everything. The letters. The affair. The years of deception. The decision was hers alone. Junior stood and approached his mother. He asked if what my father said was true. Dolores did not answer. She looked away, her hands trembling. Junior's face hardened. He told her she had spent his entire life lecturing him and Marcus about integrity, about honesty, about living according to principle. He said she had held them to impossible standards while concealing her own failures. He said he was done. He walked out of the room. The front door slammed behind him. The sound reverberated through the house. Other family members began to stand. They murmured awkward goodbyes and filed out quickly, unwilling to remain in the thick tension that filled the room. Within minutes, only Marcus, Dolores, my father, and I remained. Marcus looked at me. His eyes were wet. He said my name, his voice breaking. I did not respond. I felt numb. I had spent weeks enduring his mother's cruelty, his silence, his inability to protect me. I had felt myself disappearing, erased by their combined neglect. Now I sat in the wreckage of Dolores's carefully constructed world, and I felt nothing. Marcus stood and approached his mother. He asked her why. Why had she treated me so harshly? Why had she tried to dismantle our marriage? Dolores finally looked at him. She said she had wanted better for him. She said she had wanted him to marry someone who came from a strong family, someone who could elevate him. She said I was beneath him. Marcus shook his head. He said she had been wrong. He said I was kind, intelligent, loving. He said he had been a coward, too afraid to stand up to her, too weak to protect his wife. He said he was ashamed. My father placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. He told him that recognizing one's failures was the first step toward becoming a better man. He said Marcus had a choice now. He could continue to allow his mother to control his life, or he could claim his independence, his marriage, his future. He said the decision was his to make. Marcus nodded slowly. He turned to Dolores and told her he loved her. He said she was his mother and always would be. But he could not allow her to dictate his life. He said he was married to me. He said he intended to honor that commitment. He said if she could not respect his choice, then their relationship would be limited. He would visit her. He would call her. But she would no longer be welcome in his home unless she treated me with dignity. Dolores's face crumpled. She began to cry, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked old suddenly, fragile. She nodded once, a small, defeated gesture. My father suggested we leave. He said Dolores needed time to process. He said we all needed time. Marcus agreed. We left the house together. My father walked me to Marcus's car. He kissed my forehead and told me I had been strong. He said he was proud of me. He said I had endured trials that would have broken others. He said I would continue to endure, and I would thrive. I hugged him, holding on tightly. I thanked him. He smiled and told me he had only done what any father would do. He had protected his child. He walked to his own car and drove away. Marcus and I sat in silence. He started the engine but did not drive. He looked at me and apologized. He said he should have defended me from the beginning. He said he had been weak, selfish, blind to my suffering. He said he wanted to be better. He asked if I could forgive him. I did not answer immediately. I thought about the weeks of humiliation, the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible. I thought about my father's steady presence, his quiet strength. I thought about what I wanted for my future. I told Marcus I would try. I could not promise forgiveness immediately, but I would try. He nodded, tears running down his face. He drove us home. The days following the confrontation felt strange, suspended. Marcus moved through the flat quietly, carefully, as though afraid of disturbing something fragile. He stopped answering his mother's calls immediately. He let them go to voicemail. He listened to her messages later, alone. I did not ask what she said. I no longer cared. He began coming home earlier from work. He asked about my day. He cooked dinner. He offered small gestures, tentative attempts at rebuilding what had been broken. I accepted them without enthusiasm. I felt hollowed out, uncertain of what remained between us. Aunt Camille visited. She embraced me tightly and told me she had heard what happened. She said the entire community was talking about Dolores Reed's fall from grace. She said people were shocked, some sympathetic, others gleeful. She said reputations built on judgment often crumbled spectacularly. She asked how I felt. I told her I did not know. I felt relief. I felt vindication. I felt exhausted. She nodded. She said healing took time. She said I needed to decide what I wanted. Did I want to remain married to Marcus? Did I want to rebuild our relationship? Or did I want to walk away? She said either choice was valid. She said I deserved happiness, whatever form that took. I thanked her. I told her I did not have answers yet. She told me I did not need to rush. She told me to listen to my own heart. Junior called me. He asked if we could meet. I agreed. We met at a small cafe near the flat. He looked tired, older somehow. He apologized again for his mother's behavior. He said he had confronted her after everyone left. He said she had admitted the truth. She had been unfaithful to his father years before Junior was born. She had confessed to my father, begged for his silence, and spent the rest of her life terrified someone would discover her secret. She had built her strict, controlling persona as a shield, a way to assert moral authority and deflect scrutiny from her own past. Junior said understanding her motivations did not excuse her actions. He said she had been cruel. He said Marcus had been complicit through his silence. Junior asked how I was managing. I told him I was taking things one day at a time. He nodded. He said he admired my strength. He said most people would have left by now. I told him I was still considering it. He did not seem surprised. He said he would not blame me if I chose to leave. He said Marcus needed to prove himself worthy of a second chance. He said words were easy. Actions mattered. I agreed. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence. As we parted, Junior hugged me. He told me I deserved better than what his family had given me. He said he hoped Marcus would rise to meet that standard. My father invited Marcus and me to dinner again. Marcus hesitated. He seemed nervous, uncertain of how to face my father after everything that had happened. I told him we should go. I wanted to see my father. I wanted to hear him speak about what he had done. We arrived on a quiet evening. My father greeted us warmly. He shook Marcus's hand, held it firmly, looked him in the eye. He said nothing about the confrontation. He simply welcomed us inside. Dinner was simple, familiar. Roast chicken again. Green beans. Mashed potatoes. We ate slowly, conversation minimal. My father asked Marcus about work, about plans, about small, inconsequential things. Marcus answered politely. He seemed grateful for the normalcy, the absence of judgment. After dinner, we sat in the living room. My father poured tea. He looked at Marcus and asked him a question. He asked what kind of man Marcus wanted to be. Marcus looked startled. He stammered, uncertain how to respond. My father waited patiently. Marcus finally said he wanted to be a good man. A good husband. Someone his father would have been proud of. My father nodded. He said Thomas Reed had been a good man. Honest. Loyal. Strong. He said Marcus had the potential to be the same. But potential meant nothing without action. He said Marcus had failed me. He had allowed his mother to demean me, to attempt to dismantle our marriage, to treat me as though I were worthless. Marcus's silence had been a betrayal. My father's words were firm but not unkind. Marcus lowered his head. He said he knew. He said he was ashamed. My father told him shame was useful only if it led to change. He asked Marcus what he intended to do differently. Marcus said he would protect me. He would set boundaries with his mother. He would prioritize our marriage. My father asked if he meant it. Marcus said he did. My father said time would tell. He said I deserved a husband who stood beside me, not behind me. He said if Marcus could not be that man, he should let me go. Marcus nodded, his eyes red. My father turned to me. He asked what I wanted. I looked at Marcus, then at my father. I said I wanted a partner. I wanted someone who valued me, respected me, fought for me. I said I was tired of feeling invisible. I said I did not know if Marcus could become that person. I said I was willing to give him the opportunity to try, but I would not wait forever. My father nodded. He said that was fair. He said I should trust my instincts. He said if the marriage could be saved, it would require effort from both of us. But I should never sacrifice my dignity, my worth, my happiness to preserve something broken. He said I was strong enough to walk away if necessary. I believed him. We left my father's house late that evening. Marcus drove slowly, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He thanked me for giving him a chance. He said he would prove himself. I told him I hoped he would. I did not offer reassurance. I did not offer comfort. I simply stated the truth. The future of our marriage depended entirely on his actions. Marcus began to change. The transformation was slow, tentative, but undeniable. He stopped taking his mother's calls entirely for several weeks. He told her he needed space, time to process everything that had happened. Dolores resisted initially. She called repeatedly, left long voicemails, sent text messages. Marcus did not respond. Eventually, the calls lessened. When he finally agreed to speak with her, he set conditions. She was not to criticize me. She was not to interfere in our marriage. She was not to visit unannounced. If she violated these boundaries, he would end the conversation. Dolores agreed, though her voice sounded strained, resentful. Marcus held firm. He began coming home with flowers. Small bouquets purchased from the grocery store near his office. He left notes on the kitchen counter. Simple messages. Thinking of you. Thank you for being patient. I love you. I read them without comment. I placed the flowers in vases. I appreciated the gestures, though they felt insufficient against the weight of what had happened. Marcus seemed to understand. He did not ask for praise. He simply continued. He started cooking dinner most evenings. He was not a skilled cook, but he tried. He made pasta, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables. We ate together at the small kitchen table. He asked about my day. He listened when I spoke. He shared details about his work, his colleagues, small frustrations and victories. Conversation remained stilted at first. We had forgotten how to talk to one another. Slowly, gradually, ease returned. I found myself laughing at a joke he made. He smiled, surprised and pleased. The moment felt fragile, significant. He suggested we attend counseling. I agreed. We found a counselor, a calm older woman named Dr. Harrison. She listened to our story without judgment. She asked questions, probed gently, guided us toward understanding. She helped Marcus articulate the fear that had paralyzed him. He had been terrified of losing his mother's approval, of being disowned, of being cast out. She helped me articulate the pain of invisibility, of being diminished, of feeling unloved. We cried during sessions. We argued. We slowly began to rebuild trust. Dr. Harrison told us healing was not linear. She said setbacks would happen. She said the commitment to continue mattered more than perfection. Dolores reached out to me directly. She sent a letter. I opened it with trembling hands. She apologized. She said she had been wrong. She said she had been cruel, judgmental, controlling. She said she had projected her own fears and insecurities onto me. She said she had been terrified of losing Marcus, of being replaced, of becoming irrelevant. She said my father's revelation had forced her to confront truths she had spent decades avoiding. She said she was ashamed. She asked for forgiveness. She said she understood if I could not offer it. She said she hoped, in time, we might find a way forward. I read the letter several times. I felt no anger. I felt pity. I felt sadness for a woman who had lived so long in fear, who had built walls so high she had isolated herself. I did not respond immediately. I needed time to consider whether forgiveness was possible. Marcus arranged a dinner. Just the two of us. He took me to a small restaurant we had visited during our courtship. Candlelight, quiet music, simple food. He told me he loved me. He said he had never stopped loving me, even during the worst moments. He said he had simply lost his way. He said I had been right to question whether he could be the partner I deserved. He said he was still learning, still growing. He said he wanted to spend the rest of his life proving he could be the man I needed. I listened. I looked across the table at him. I saw sincerity in his eyes. I saw effort. I saw change. I told him I loved him too. I told him I had been angry, hurt, lost. I told him I was still healing. I told him we were still healing. He nodded. He reached across the table and took my hand. I did not pull away. Aunt Camille visited and told me she was proud of me. She said I had navigated an impossible situation with grace. She said many women would have left, would have walked away without looking back. She said there was no shame in that choice. She said there was also no shame in choosing to stay, to fight for something worth saving. She asked if I believed my marriage was worth saving. I told her I was beginning to think it might be. She smiled. She said that was enough. She said certainty was not required. She said commitment to the process was what mattered. My father called one evening. He asked how things were progressing. I told him about Marcus's efforts, the counseling, the slow rebuilding. My father listened quietly. He asked if I was happy. I paused. I told him I was not unhappy. I told him I was cautiously hopeful. He said that was a good place to start. He said hope was powerful. He said I should continue to trust my instincts. He said if the marriage continued to improve, I would know. If it stagnated, I would know that too. He said I should never settle for less than I deserved. I thanked him. I told him I would always be grateful for what he had done. He told me he had simply reminded Dolores Reed that secrets had consequences. He told me he had watched her spend years building a fortress of judgment, and he had simply shown her the cracks in the foundation. He said he hoped she would learn from the experience. He said he hoped we all would. Dolores requested a meeting. She asked Marcus to arrange it. She said she wanted to speak with me directly. Marcus asked if I was willing. I considered refusing. I considered ignoring the request entirely. Something in me, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a desire for closure, made me agree. We met at a neutral location, a quiet park near my father's house. Dolores arrived early. She sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree. I approached slowly. She stood when she saw me. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The sharp edges that had once defined her seemed softened, worn away by shame. She thanked me for coming. She said she had not been certain I would. I sat down on the bench. She sat beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. She asked how I was. I told her I was managing. She nodded. She said she had been thinking about me constantly since the confrontation. She said she had spent weeks replaying her actions, her words, her cruelty. She said she had been forced to confront the person she had become. She said she did not like what she saw. She said my father had been right. She had built her life on a foundation of hypocrisy and fear. She had judged others harshly to deflect attention from her own failings. She had treated me abominably because I represented everything she feared: youth, innocence, the possibility of a future unburdened by past mistakes. She apologized again. She said she knew words were insufficient. She said she understood if I could never forgive her. She said she hoped, at the very least, I could accept her apology. She said she wanted to be part of Marcus's life, and by extension, part of mine. She said she would respect any boundaries I set. She said she would never interfere again. She looked at me, her eyes wet. She said she was sorry. I believed her. I felt the sincerity beneath the words. I told her I accepted her apology. I told her forgiveness would take time. I told her trust would need to be rebuilt slowly. She nodded. She said she understood. She said she would wait. She said she would prove herself through actions, not words. We sat in silence for several minutes. Birds sang in the trees above us. Children played in the distance. The world continued around us, indifferent to our small drama. Dolores asked about my mother. She said she remembered Pauline Carter. She said they had attended the same church years ago, though they had never been close. She said Pauline had been kind, gentle, gracious. She said she had always admired those qualities. She said she saw them in me. I felt my throat tighten. I thanked her. She said I was stronger than my mother had been. She said I had endured trials that would have crushed others. She said I had emerged intact. I told her I did not always feel strong. She said strength was not the absence of fear or pain. It was the willingness to continue despite them. Dolores asked if she could visit occasionally. She said she would call first. She said she would respect our space, our marriage, our autonomy. She said she wanted to know me. She said she wanted to understand the woman her son had chosen. I told her she could visit. I told her I would welcome the effort. She smiled, a small, tentative smile. She thanked me. We stood. She hesitated, then opened her arms. I stepped into the embrace. It was awkward, tentative, but genuine. We parted with a mutual understanding. The past could not be erased. But perhaps it could be redeemed. Marcus was waiting when I returned home. He asked how the meeting had gone. I told him it had gone well. I told him his mother had apologized sincerely. I told him I believed she was trying. Marcus exhaled, relief evident on his face. He said he was grateful. He said he had been terrified of losing me, terrified of losing his mother, terrified of having to choose. He said my willingness to meet with her, to offer a path toward reconciliation, meant everything. I told him reconciliation was not guaranteed. I told him it would require continued effort from all of us. He nodded. He said he understood. He said he would continue to do the work. Junior visited later that week. He said he had heard about the meeting. He said Dolores had called him, told him about the conversation, expressed cautious hope. Junior seemed pleased. He said his mother had been humbled, genuinely changed by the confrontation. He said he was not naive. He knew she might revert to old patterns. But he believed the foundation had shifted. He believed she understood finally, that her control had limits. He said he was grateful to my father. He said Gerald Carter had done what needed to be done. He said my father had reminded Dolores that integrity could not be faked indefinitely. Junior asked if I was happy. I told him I was working toward happiness. He smiled. He said that was all anyone could ask. My father invited the entire family to dinner. Marcus, me, Dolores, Junior, Aunt Camille. Dolores hesitated when Marcus extended the invitation. She asked if Gerald truly wanted her there. Marcus assured her he did. She accepted. We gathered at my father's house on a Sunday evening. The table was set with care. My father had cooked a feast. Roast chicken, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, sweet potato pie. The smells filled the house, warm and welcoming. We sat together, an unlikely assembly. My father offered a prayer. He thanked God for family, for forgiveness, for second chances. He asked for continued guidance and grace. We ate together, conversation flowing more easily than I had expected. Laughter rose occasionally. Dolores smiled more than once. She complimented the food, thanked my father for his hospitality. He nodded graciously. He treated her with kindness, not condescension. He offered her dignity, the very thing she had once denied me. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. He asked if I was at peace. I told him I was getting there. I told him I still had doubts, still carried hurt, but I was healing. He told me healing was a process, not a destination. He told me I had handled everything with remarkable grace. He told me I reminded him of my mother. I hugged him tightly. I thanked him for everything. He said he had simply done what fathers do. He had protected his child. He said he would always protect me. I believed him. Months passed. The seasons changed. Marcus and I settled into a rhythm. We continued counseling. We continued working on our marriage. Small victories accumulated. Trust rebuilt slowly. Dolores visited occasionally, always calling first, always respectful of boundaries. She brought gifts, small tokens. A plant for the flat. A cookbook she thought I might enjoy. A photograph of Marcus as a child. She asked questions about my life, my interests, my plans. She listened when I spoke. She offered advice sparingly, only when asked. She became, gradually, someone I could tolerate. Someone I might, eventually, consider family. Junior became a regular presence. He and Marcus grew closer. They spent time together, brothers reconnecting after years of distance imposed by their mother's controlling nature. Junior started dating someone, a kind woman named Kendra. He brought her to family dinners. She fit in easily, laughed readily, treated everyone with warmth. I liked her immediately. She and I became friends. She told me she admired how I had navigated a difficult situation. She said she was not sure she would have been as gracious. I told her grace had not come easily. I told her I had been angry, broken, lost. She said showing up despite the pain required a different kind of strength. I appreciated her perspective. Aunt Camille remained a constant source of support. She visited often, brought food, sat with me, listened. She told me stories about my mother, about the woman I had never fully known. She said my mother would have been proud of me. She said Pauline had always believed in quiet strength, in patience, in the power of enduring. She said I embodied those qualities. I cherished her words. I cherished her presence. She was the anchor that kept me steady when everything else felt uncertain. My father's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of age. He moved more carefully. He tired more easily. I visited him often. We sat together in the living room, drinking tea, talking about small things and large. He told me stories about his friendship with Thomas Reed, about the man Marcus's father had been. He said Thomas had been honest, loyal, dependable. He said he had liked him immensely. He said keeping Dolores's secret had been difficult, but he had done it out of respect for Thomas. He said he had never imagined he would need to use that secret as leverage. He said life was strange, unpredictable. He said he was glad he had been able to protect me when it mattered. I told him he had saved me. He said I had saved myself. He said he had simply reminded me of my worth. Marcus and I began talking about the future. We discussed children, careers, where we wanted to live. We discussed dreams deferred, hopes rekindled. We discussed the possibility of buying a house, something with a garden, space for a family. We visited properties on weekends. We imagined ourselves in different spaces, building different lives. The conversations felt hopeful, tentative but real. I began to believe we might make it. I began to believe we might build something lasting. Dolores attended a dinner at our flat. I cooked. She praised the meal, helped clean dishes, sat with us on the sofa afterwards. She asked about our plans. We told her about the house search, about our hopes for the future. She smiled. She said she was happy for us. She said she had been wrong about me. She said I was exactly the kind of woman Marcus needed. She said I had strength, integrity, patience. She said those qualities were rare. She said she was sorry it had taken her so long to see them. I thanked her. I told her I appreciated her honesty. She reached across the sofa and squeezed my hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. It carried acknowledgement. It carried the beginning of something resembling respect. The following Sunday, we gathered at my father's house again. The entire family. Marcus, me, Dolores, Junior, Kendra, Aunt Camille. My father presided over the table, his presence calm and reassuring. He looked around at the assembled faces and smiled. He said he was grateful. He said family was complicated, messy, imperfect. He said love required effort, forgiveness, the willingness to see beyond faults. He said we had all learned that lesson. He said he was proud of us. He raised his glass. We raised ours. We toasted to family, to second chances, to futures built on truth rather than secrets. I looked around the table. I saw faces I had once feared, faces that had caused me pain. I saw them differently now. I saw humanity, flawed and striving. I saw the possibility of redemption. Marcus took my hand beneath the table. He squeezed gently. I squeezed back. We had traveled a difficult road. We had stumbled, fallen, nearly given up. We had been tested by cruelty, by weakness, by the weight of hidden truths. We had survived. We had emerged changed, scarred perhaps, but intact. I looked at my father. He met my gaze and nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement. He had fought for me when I could not fight for myself. He had wielded truth as a weapon, not out of malice, but out of love. He had reminded me, reminded all of us, that integrity mattered. That secrets had consequences. That patience, even in the face of injustice, could lead to something resembling justice. I did not know what the future held. I did not know if Marcus and I would last forever, if Dolores would maintain her transformation, if the fragile peace we had built would endure. I knew only that I had reclaimed my dignity. I had refused to disappear. I had stood quietly at my wedding while my husband's mother mocked me. And I had waited. I had trusted my father. I had trusted myself. The revelation had come. The truth had been spoken. Justice, imperfect and human, had arrived. This story reminds us that silence is not always weakness, and patience is not always passivity. Sometimes, the most powerful response to cruelty is to endure with dignity, trusting that truth will eventually emerge. Integrity cannot be performed or faked indefinitely. Those who build their authority on judgment and secrecy ultimately find their foundations unstable. Family is complicated, woven with love and pain, loyalty and betrayal. Healing requires effort from all parties, the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, and the courage to extend forgiveness without forgetting the lessons learned. We are all flawed, carrying secrets and scars. Redemption is possible when we choose honesty over image, when we prioritize connection over control, and when we recognize that love, real and lasting, demands we see each other fully and choose to stay anyway.